Hello and welcome to the Warehouse Podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. My name is Tyler, and man, do we have a lot to go through today. It was a busy trade deadline for not just the Orioles, but all of Major League Baseball. It seemed like a ton of pieces got moved, especially in the last, 24, 36 hours or so. Just a lot happening. And the Orioles, I didn't go and tally up every single move around the league and credit to each team, but the Orioles did a lot. Maybe only the Twins made more moves, and I think the Twins have a much different reaction to their moves than the Orioles and the fan base here has. But I think those two teams did most of the selling at this trade deadline. We're going to get into all of it. I don't have a ton of time for this recap. I'm not going to say anything revolutionary here. I don't think. I know pretty much every other podcast and outlet has already put their stuff out yesterday, so a little late to the game, but we do what we can. We're gonna get to each of the moves. I'm gonna very quickly break down each one of them. Like I said, I've only got maybe 20, 25 minutes to do this, so I'm gonna go through the whole deadline, my general takeaways, and where the Orioles go from here. Because I think that's the most important part of this is like the context of it, of what the Orioles were trying to do, what they did, and where do they go from here to kind of give a full like grade of what the Orioles did at this deadline. Because it's not just about today; it's about I think these next 8 months until we get back to training camp or spring training rather, the opening day, stuff like that. That's when it's going to really, we're going to feel the full impacts of this. Just a couple caveats on this. I'm not a professional baseball scout. The young players that the Orioles got, I am not familiar with pretty much any of them. Some of the names you hear, occasionally dropped in when you're, digging through top 30 lists and stuff, because I am a little bit of a sicko and I do that sometimes. But in general, I don't know who these players are prior to the Orioles getting them. So any sort of like feedback in terms of value and things like that, I'm going based off of the outlets that I think all of you can access just as easily. It's, Pipeline, Fangraphs, The Athletic, Baseball America, you see some of that. So that, when I'm talking about these players, it's coming from their perspective and I'm sort of just regurgitating it. I can speak to the logic of trading a player at a certain time, and I can speak to the general strategy that the Orioles seem to employ in these sort of sell-offs, because it's not the first one we've had under Mike Elias. It's not the first time the Orioles have traded away a player and, kind of what he's tried to get back. And it's been a couple years since then. The last time we did that really with the Mancini, Jorge Lopez trade deadline in, I guess, 2022 that was. So we're a little bit out of practice on it, but a lot of the theory behind all of it has kind of remained true. So I'm going to speak about it from that perspective. And I just want you guys to understand that I don't have any new and unique perspectives on these prospects. So that out of the way, let's talk about the prospects here. Just a quick reminder, if you do like the show and you enjoy this, subscribe to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We also have a YouTube page where we currently have 305 subscribers. You can go there and you can see me. Hello, I'm waving to the camera now. You can also see my screen on my laptop that I'm going through and looking at these various things sort of as a reference in case what I'm talking about maybe isn't making sense on the audio version. Head over to YouTube, totally free, subscribe. And also, if you're watching this video on YouTube, leave a comment about what you think the Orioles did at the deadline. Give them a grade, A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever you want to give them, and give some comments on what you think they could have done better, what they did great, all that kind of stuff. Really interested to hear your thoughts. All right. Let's get into the deadline. It's going to be super quick, super fast. But you got to go back to July 10th with the Orioles to start this deadline. And that's the day they traded Brian Baker to the Tampa Bay Rays for the 37th overall pick. Turn that pick into Slater DeBruin, a high school outfielder that the Orioles then signed for an above slot bonus of, I think, $4 million, if I'm remembering correctly. But regardless, they basically traded Baker for DeBruin. DeBruin goes right into an Orioles top 30 list. Probably not a top 100 prospect right now, but sort of selected in that Gunnar Henderson range, that not Kobe Mayo. Kobe Mayo was a later pick. That Jordan Westburg sort of range of a competitive balance pick. That the Orioles have clearly done a good job at. They found good value there. Henderson, a high schooler, Westburg, a college player, now DeBruin, a high schooler. So I feel like that's sort of that's been Mike Elias's bread and butter, is that sort of sandwich round picks. He's had a lot of success there. So excited to see what DeBruin turns into. And with the trading of Baker, he is one that is unique to some of these other moves because he had years of control left. The only other players they traded that are under control beyond 2025 were Ramon Urias and Ramon Laureano, who I think you could argue both of them are more, bench type players. Obviously, Laureano's become more of that this year, but I think going into next year, you hope the outfield is developing and going up a level. and Laureano being signed to be more of a, 3 or 4 times a week kind of a guy versus 5, 6, 7 times a week of a guy in the lineup. Baker had more years than that, but didn't have any options left. And what we're going to see is a big transition of this bullpen. We knew that coming into the deadline. We knew that Soto and Dominguez were going to go. We were pretty sure Kittredge would go, and all those things happened. Baker going adds to that. Bautista being hurt. We're going to see a lot of moving pieces in the bullpen in August and September, and I think that is to give the Orioles some data on which to build their bullpen next year. I don't think they're going to go sign some veterans. I assume they're going to have some guys that don't have options. They're going to have some guys given some beefy salaries, but in general, I think like half the bullpen is going to be these optionable guys that you're going to have, 4 guys in Baltimore, 4 or 5 guys in Norfolk that you're going to cycle through. And eventually, you'll find maybe 1 or 2 of those guys you really like. They'll stick around. You're going to feel good about, Bautista, maybe 1 or 2 veterans you go sign at the back of your bullpen. And then beyond that, it's going to be very flexible. You're going to be able to trade this, pull these guys up, send these guys down, because that's not something the Orioles have had for most of the season. And that I think is the logic behind the Baker deal was he didn't have any options. Yes, he's been good this year, but we've seen him be bad in the past. And if we try to DFA him, he's going to get claimed by somebody. So let's just get the draft pick while we can. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially in a lost season. And then you got to move down to the 25th. That's when they trade Gregory Soto to the Mets to get one of the more interesting names at this deadline that the Orioles acquired. Wellington Aracena, a right-handed pitcher, and then also right-handed pitcher Cameron Foster. Foster, a relief-only prospect at this point. Aracena, a guy that could go either way, has more upside, has already pitched for an affiliate for the Orioles so far. I think he's down in Delmarva. Had a really good debut. I think 5 shutout innings, struck out like 6 or 7. Looked really good. He's a guy that's touched 101, and I think again could be in the bullpen in the future. But for right now, they'll develop as a starter, and is the type of arm in a starter role the Orioles haven't really had a lot of in the organization. The Fangraphs scouting report of him pretty complimentary. I forget where they have him. They've got him up at 15, so they like him a little bit more than Pipeline. Had a velo boost in 2024, they say. He's up to 101. And at the end, it says Aracena has a chance to be a special weapon in the bullpen, particularly. There aren't really many big league pitchers whose stuff bears a resemblance to Aracena's cutter heavy mix, and his future value grade of 45 is in line with that of a good setup man. So again, not a bullpen guy this second, being developed as a starter. If he becomes a bullpen guy, that won't be until down the road, I imagine. Foster is a guy that is a reliever. I think this is his first year as a reliever in the Mets system. Has been pretty good. 26 years old. He's up to AAA now, and he's a guy that you're going to see, I think, in the bullpen mix next year. I don't think he's going to be up this season, but next year he'll have all his options. He can go up and down. Probably not a guy you're giving the 8th inning on opening day, but maybe he develops into that. I don't know, but I think at the very least he's a guy who's going to yo-yo between Norfolk and Baltimore next year. I think that's something the Orioles were clearly after at this deadline was, mid-tier prospects, guys that factor into the bullpen, and to give them some flexibility there. So I think like the Aracena pickup is very interesting to me. High ceiling. Foster gives you that like solid floor, and you're potentially getting, if both of them make the majors, you're getting 6 years of each of them, maybe both in the bullpen for 2 months of Gregory Soto, who goes to the Mets, who really needed a bullpen piece. So a win-win for both teams there. Makes a lot of sense. Then the next trade was on the 29th, Sir Anthony Dominguez to the Blue Jays for Warren Watts Brown, right-handed pitcher. This is one of those guys that has a little bit of a different outlook depending on who you are talking to. Watts Brown, Fangraphs ranks him 37th in the Orioles organization now. MLB Pipeline has him at 9th. And then I think the most interesting perspective actually came from Keith Law at The Athletic. He says Watts Brown, 23, was the Blue Jays' 3rd-round pick in 2023 out of Oklahoma State. He is a potential starter, definitely some kind of a big leaguer with a pretty easy delivery in a 3-pitch mix. His fastball ranges from 91 to 96, topping out around 96.5, with a 55 slider on a 20/80 scouting scale, so above average, and a curveball that looks like it could be plus, but plays more average to above average. So it's, a 50, maybe it could be a 60. It sounds like, if it's plus, it's going to be a 60. And it's a traditional 12-6 and is nice to look at, but that's not what matters in the end. He has a changeup, but barely uses it and doesn't show much feel for it, preferring his downward breaking slider and changeup situations to lefties. He's had no platoon split this year overall between high A and double A. So, what I want to point out here with the rankings is he hit 9th on Pipeline, what did I say? 37th on Fangraphs. That doesn't necessarily mean that these two outlets view them crazy different. Fangraphs has him as a 40 future value, and Pipeline has him as a 45, I believe. So yes, those are different metrics. Those are different numbers rather, and that does have Brown as a tick above on Pipeline um versus Fangraphs, and that could be the difference between if Pipeline thinks he's a starter versus Fangraphs thinks he's a middle reliever. Those are different things there. Orioles again are going to try him as a starter to begin things, and this is sort of the type of arm that Mike Elias likes to get. It reminds me of Kyle Bradish a little bit, a breaking ball heavy guy, middling velocity, and a lot of people talked about Bradish as a relief pitcher coming over from the Angels in the Dylan Bundy deal years ago. Fast forward, we know Bradish is more than that. He's already had one really good season. Started off really well last year when we had the elbow stuff. We'll see what he can do in August and September this year. Watts Brown in that similar mode. I think it's again a logical pickup. This is the type of pitcher that Mike Elias goes after, is sort of this mid-tier arm that you can has kind of gone through the growing pains initially out of the draft with another organization. Then the Orioles sweep him up when they're a year or two into their development and kind of get them to the finish line. Now, the Orioles haven't done a fantastic job of that with like a ton of prospects, but Bradish is a success story there. Povich is very similar, left-handed, came from the Twins in the Jorge Lopez deal. Hasn't been fantastic, but has been a contributor at the major league level. If Watts Brown can be that, I think that's what the Orioles would love to do, is like continually churn out 3, 4, 5 type starters, and then maybe sign an ace for a year or two here and there. That seems to be the Elias game plan. Hasn't worked out perfectly to this point. If they can have more success stories like Watts Brown, or if Watts Brown becomes one of those success stories, I think that's great. He's got an expected time in the majors at 2026. So next year, I think we could be seeing him. Then we get to deadline day where a bunch of the moves happened. So I think the first one was, or I'm sorry, there was a bunch of deals. So I'm going to get a little turned around here. I believe there was an Andrew Kittredge deal, right? Yeah, Kittredge gets traded to the Chicago Cubs for shortstop Wilfrey De La Cruz. I'm gonna go through all these because it's a bunch and they all kind of factor into the same conversation. So Wilfrey De La Cruz, then there was Ramon Urias gets dealt to the Astros for right-handed pitcher Twine Palmer, and then Cedric Mullins gets dealt to the Mets for 3 pitchers: right-handed pitcher Ramon Gomez, right-handed pitcher Anthony Nunez, and right-handed pitcher Chandler Marsh. So let me go over here and let's look through some of these names here where Fangraphs has them ranked. So we already got him. Sorry, I'm scrolling through here to kind of reacclimate myself. So Anthony Nunez came over in the Mullins deal. He's looked at as a single inning relief pitcher, drafted out of high school as a shortstop in 2019, released in 2021, then used an NCAA rule exemption to attend a Division II University of Tampa, where he began his journey to the mound, signed last summer, and the transition became full-fledged in the Mets organization. So kind of an interesting, route to go to get to the mound, and he's still, a little bit raw in that regard. But again, kind of looked at as a relief pitcher, ranked 30th in the organization according to Fangraphs. I think Pipeline might have him a little bit higher. Let's see. Pipeline has him 24th in the organization. Again, an expected arrival in the big leagues, actually of this year, but probably going to be pushed to next year with the Orioles. As we go along, we'll get to the San Diego Padres additions in just a second. Wilfrey De La Cruz, this is a 17, almost 18-year-old, not expecting the big leagues until 2031, so don't get too excited just yet. He's got some development to go. Shortstop right now, going to be a third baseman. It sounds like long-term. Report on him from Fangraphs. De La Cruz has a square-shouldered frame with slightly above average size and physical projection. Scouts have his defensive fit assessed as a mix of shortstop and third base with more of the latter. Strong for his age, is a little less projectable than most of his peers. He has an easy, comfortable swing and posted an above-average contact rate in the Dominican Summer League. De La Cruz's bat path is long, and his bat speed from the left side is better than it is from the right, so a switch hitter. Overall, it's a pretty exciting, high-variance, projectable switch-hitting infielder who had a good pro debut and won't turn 18 until September. So the Orioles essentially getting an additional, international signing from, I think, 2 years ago. Signed for $2.3 million from the Cubs, and now the Orioles get to add him, to the lower ranks. Probably going to be in Delmarva at some point soon. And this is sort of more of what the Orioles want to get into. Is, it's a little bit rare for Elias to target a hitter in these trades. He gets a lot of pitchers. So interesting, kind of one of these young hitters where the Orioles need some help, I think, at the very bottom of their organization with some of these raw talents. It's, there's some interesting pieces coming out. Basayo obviously is one of these guys years ago, but not a ton of them are hitting just yet. Maybe De La Cruz can be a little bit of a different influence there. So I think that's like a really good value of Kittredge for De La Cruz. Kittredge obviously had an option for next year, but it was $9 million. He's been hurt and has pitched okay, but not fantastic. Probably a situation where the Orioles weren't going to pick up that option for $9 million next year. So let's trade him, get something for him. I think again, this is interesting value there. If we keep going along here, other additions. Ramon Gomez from the Mets came over in the Mullins deal. Has a future value of 40, high risk. He's in high A right now. A single inning relief pitcher. Projected to get to the majors in 2026. We'll see. Once peaking at 99, Gomez has touched 105 this year and is sitting 97 to 103. His arm speed breaks the sound barrier, and when his delivery is synced up, Gomez approaches the upper boundary of what is possible for humans to do with a baseball. He has zero idea where it's going and throws a ton of non-competitive pitches, especially when he throws his low 90s slider, which he lands for a strike less than 60% of the time. Gomez is still somehow limiting opponents to a 154 batting average and 60% contact rate. Both his pitches are generating elite miss. It's reasonable that Gomez would struggle to control his new velocity. It's historic. He's more likely to be a Ben Joyce, Mauricio Cabrera, or Tygo Vieira type than Aroldis Chapman, more a marvel than a truly effective pitcher. So an interesting skill set, and one, again, the Orioles don't really get a lot of, is these dudes that are throwing high velocity. If they can somehow maybe limit him to two pitches, fastball, slider, hone in the control a little bit. Obviously, this is pretty much only going to be a relief pitcher type, but the Orioles need more of that high end velocity at the back of the bullpen. They don't have a ton of it. Bautista's not quite that anymore. He's still 97, 98, but doesn't feel like he's a 99, 100 guy with regularity, especially now that he's got the shoulder stuff. So I think again, a lottery ticket a little bit, but one worth taking advantage of. And they have him ranked 45th in the organization. But obviously, if he can hone the control a little bit, he's going to be better than that. As we keep going along here, I talked about Foster already. Came over in the Soto deal. Going to be a single inning relief pitcher. Interesting there. Twine Palmer comes over for Ramon Urias. 35 future value, projected to get to the majors in 2028. High risk though. He's unrefined, has walked 19 and 29 in the third innings, and that's a major improvement from his draft year. But he's also 6'5" with a Josh Collmenter arm slot. He only sits 90 to 93, but he gets 19 inches of IVB. I know that's some sort of vertical break, I believe, and massive amounts of in-zone miss on his heater in a manner that merits further study. Palmer's north-south attack with his slider, cutter, and curve gives lefties fits, and he's only allowed 3 extra base hits, all doubles, in 126 batters faced. A funky reliever is probably all that should be hoped for this stage, but that's more than most dare dreaming about in the 19th round. So again, a reliever look to him, but that's valuable. That could be interesting. And again, these are young guys. These are guys years away, but another interesting addition there. And that seems to be all of the names in there from those various trades. So let's talk about the fact the Orioles traded some of these guys. Kittredge, already talked about that. Makes a ton of sense. Mullins, sad to see Mullins go, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on him here. Obviously, a club legend. I think he'll be an Orioles team Hall of Famer at some point. A Gold Glove caliber type outfielder. Always really seemed really affable and likable, and maybe not always the most boisterous guy, but just a really nice, likable guy. Had the only 30-30 season in Orioles team history. I just really liked watching him play, especially in the outfield. The bat never quite got to where it was again that 30-30 season, but was continually kind of a league average bat while having an elite glove, and obviously the arm, was always kind of, not quite at that same level, but makes a lot of sense going to the Mets. Mets are a really good team. I thought the Mets would get, I think I talked about this in the group chat with Eli and Jesse. Mullins and a reliever seemed like a fit for the Mets. It could have been a package deal. Ended up being Mullins and Soto in two separate deals, and they get 5 total prospects back for them. Varying degrees of, excitement with all of those, but always made a ton of sense for them. And the Orioles in exchange get, a trio of right-handed pitchers, probably all of them, relief types at this point, but an interesting mix of names. And I'm excited for Mullins to go to a good situation in New York where the Mets are really good. All of baseball is wide open. I think that's why we saw so many moves made, is that really there's no one team that feels like head and shoulders above. The Dodgers have a ton of talent, but the pitching is questionable at this point. The Yankees, I think, had a really good deadline, but if Judge is hurt, who knows what that team is going to look like because he's just so crucial. I mean, he's arguably the best hitter in the game. But so many teams are in it. So I think that's why so many teams were active at the deadline. But really interesting there. So I'm happy for Mullins to get a chance, and he'll be a free agent after the season. I don't necessarily expect him back in Baltimore, but hopefully he gets a nice deal somewhere to play every day and be their center fielder. I think the deal worth most comment is the Ramon Urias deal here in this batch because he had the year of team control next year. We know now the Astros also went and got Carlos Correa, who's going to come over and play third base. I think initially when this trade happened, it was thought maybe Urias will be their third baseman. They're missing Isaac Paredes for the rest of the season. Turns out he's going to go and pretty much do the same role with Houston that he does here in Baltimore, is be that utility guy, plug and play. Correa, not exactly the hitter he was years ago with the Astros, so maybe Urias does get in there at third base a little bit more often than we're thinking right now. But had the year of team control next year, I think Urias has gotten a tough deal with Orioles fans for a long time. Maybe not if you listen to this podcast and you're kind of keyed into the metrics and stuff. But I think a lot of fans expect him to be this some crazy valuable type of player. But he's just a good, solid league average hitter. I think a slightly above average glove. Obviously, has the Gold Glove at third base from years ago, but is a guy you feel confident putting in the lineup for any one of your starters on a day-to-day basis. He plays a lot. He's played first base, third base, second base, played shortstop years ago, but you could put him in there and not feel like he's totally going to be a butcher out there. And that's tough to find. So, replacing that value immediately is going to be tough. The Royals don't get a ton for him. Palmer is not a super high rated prospect. He's young, raw, kind of looked at as a reliever eventually anyway. So it's not like you're getting a huge ceiling for that. But at the same time, Urias, not an everyday player. I think when he does play every single day, he gets exposed a little bit, but still has value on the bench. And you just have to wonder what the Orioles are going to do for that spot now in 2026 when the team is said to be wanting to compete. They're going to bring up Jeremiah Jackson, who's had a nice season in the minors, but not an Orioles draft pick. He's been cast off because he didn't work out. I forget where he was drafted originally. So it's a big thing to replace some big shoes to fill for a team that wants to win next year, and you're going to need a guy like that can come in and spell Holiday for a day or Westberg for a day. Um, can Jackson do that? Do they need to go shopping in the offseason? We shall see. But I think that's interesting. It's not shocking to see Urias go. I think anybody that was only under team control through next year was kind of on the table. And Urias not being an everyday player, not being a part of the core, was certainly going to be available. I think people are more surprised that if you're going to trade him, maybe get a little bit more for him. But I think my thought on that is, well, he's going into his final year of arbitration. Maybe he was going to be a little bit expensive for what the Orioles were comfortable with for that spot, being, a 1.5 WAR type player that plays, half the games, but is not super crucial to what we're trying to do. Maybe we're going to non-tender him anyway, or maybe we're going to look to trade him in the offseason. So let's float him now, and maybe they like Palmer's makeup. I don't know. I'm not sure there, but they obviously found the value in it now because they didn't need to do it right now. So you'll trust Elias on that, I suppose. But if the Orioles can't find a reliable utility guy, I'm not saying Jackson has to be that guy. He'll get a shot here, I think, in the next 2 months. They need to have somebody for that spot because it is a crucial spot. And we also know that those names are available at the deadline. We saw the Yankees just had Caballero at the deadline. He's an interesting kind of option like that. So if there's not a guy like that going into 2026, if the Orioles are competing, they can add that at the deadline. But it's tough to see Urias go. Been a good player for 5 years with the Orioles. Has done everything he's been asked. Has really been solid. So it's sad to see him go, but I can understand it. You just have to now kind of replace those shoes. One more big deal. Well, let's skip the Padres deal real quick, and we'll just talk about Charlie Morton deal real quick. Traded Charlie Morton to the Tigers. They get left-handed pitcher Micah Ashman. They did a separate deal with the Tigers to get what's his name, Enns. I wonder if he's on here. Yeah, Dietrich Enns. Separate deal with the Tigers, but you can kind of think of them in conjunction. So Dietrich Enns and this left-handed prospect, Micah Ashman for Morton. I thought Morton would go for a little bit more than he did. Ashman's 22, 6'7", 195 pounds, probably bigger than 195 pounds. Has pitched at 2 levels this year, including Double A. He's up to Double A right now. Has thrown 3 innings, allowed no runs, 2 hits, 1 walk, and 4 strikeouts. Hasn't started any games, so again, a bullpen piece and a guy that maybe factors into the bullpen next year. I want to see if yeah, Fangraphs doesn't even have him as a prospect on here. So again, this is going to be an addition to the Orioles bullpen mix for next year. He's in Double A. He'll probably finish the year in Double A. If he does well, he'll start next season at Triple A most likely. And once you're in Triple A, if you have a month or two of successful baseball, you're in the mix there. He's left-handed, which Stars don't have a ton of that in the bullpen. It's really Aiken now, and I'm not sure who. Oh, Wolfram is out there, so it's good to have a lefty in the mix. Doesn't sound like it's a ton of upside, but it's something. I thought Morton would get a little bit more than that. I figured, Morton's not viewed as an ace. I'm not sure a team views him as like, and I guess this is the issue. Does a team view him as a playoff starter? If they don't, then they're not going to give up a ton for him. I thought he would maybe fetch a little bit more. Maybe teams would see the value in a guy that can start games for you now and then be in the bullpen in the playoffs. Doesn't seem like it worked out that way. He'll start games for the Tigers for the rest of the season. The Tigers don't have like the deepest team. They're a good team. The offense is interesting. They've obviously got Tarek Skubal in the rotation. So Morton might start a playoff game for them. But I just thought he would have gotten a little bit more. It just didn't really happen. There weren't really a ton of starters that got moved around. There weren't really any top line starters that got moved around that I can think of. I know Dustin May went, but a lot of the other big starters didn't go. So I thought maybe a guy like Morton would fetch not a premium, not even a top 100 prospect, but to get a guy back that's not on these top. The Fangraphs board goes to 71 players. He's not in the top 71 according to Fangraphs rankings right now, which is interesting. But again, Elias clearly wants to get more flexible in the bullpen, and Ashman helps them do that. Again, he'll finish the season in Double A at Chesapeake, go to Norfolk probably less next year if he pitches well, and then you're in the bullpen mix. So clearly a goal in mind with a lot of these trades, and that makes a lot of sense. So good luck to Charlie. Glad he was able to pull things together the last 2 months and get himself to a playoff contender and a really good team in the Tigers. And this could be his swan song there. So excited for him to get a chance to go to the playoffs one more time. And then let's talk about the big trade of the day, in which there was trade Ryan O'Hearn and Ramon Laureano to the Padres for 6 players. Left-handed pitcher Boston Bateman, right-handed pitcher Tyson Neighbors, right-handed pitcher Tanner Smith, shortstop Brandon Butterworth, shortstop Cobb Hightower, and first baseman Victor Figueroa. So first, O'Hearn going, knew it was going to happen. He's a free agent at the end of the year, makes a ton of sense. The Padres need DH help. He'll plug right in there. Laureano's the more interesting, questionable one. He had a very reasonable option for next year. I think $6.5 million. Orioles end up saying, "Now we're gonna trade him. We're gonna get the value. Maybe he was gonna fall off the final 2 months of the season. So let's just take advantage of it." I can't hate on that, but now you have to wonder about the outfield. I assume Dylan Beavers will be up at some point, probably closer to September. Um, then you have Tyler O'Neill, who's healthy for now. Colton Cowser, who you want to see more of. And then who else is out there? Let's look at the Orioles active roster as it stands. Dylan Carlson, who's fine, a cromulent replacement level type player. It's fine. Jeremiah Jackson has been called up already. He can play some outfield too. Dylan Beavers, I think, will be up at some point. Heston Kjerstad maybe back up at some point. So it makes sense there. But again, one of those things where if you're competing in 2026, Laureano could have helped you do that. I get capitalizing on the value, but he's not a guy that I think you weren't going to pick the option up. I think $6.5 million for a guy that's basically been your best hitter this year, maybe second to O'Hearn. You're going to pick that option up. Again, has a cannon for an arm in the outfield, takes some weird routes in the outfield sometimes, but I think makes up for it with the arm. Laureano was going to get the option picked up, and I imagine unless he really stinks for the Padres, he'll get his option picked up there. So you're giving up a contributor to your 2026 team for prospects. Now, the Orioles, these were some of the more highly regarded prospects that the Orioles got back. Let's see here. The MLB Pipeline has Bateman as their 6th best prospect. Who else they got in here? Cobb Hightower as their 21st best prospect. And that might be it on here. Let's go to Fangraphs. Fangraphs redirected me to a Verizon ad, so I apologize for that. Yeah, okay. So let's see. Yeah, Fangraphs not as high on the Padres prospects. And then remember, the Padres farm system has gotten picked through quite a bit the last couple seasons. The Padres made a ton of trades. So these guys being like somewhat high rated in the Padres system didn't necessarily mean they were going to be highly rated in the Orioles system. Pipeline still had a few of them, in the top 30. Let's see. Yeah, Fangraphs has Bateman as the 36th best Orioles prospect. 40 future value, not to the bigs until 2029, but low risk, not even 20 years old yet. And they describe him as Bateman is built like the drawbridge of a medieval Transylvanian castle at a hulking 6'8" and was signed away from LSU for $2.5 million. 93 to 97, three-quarters delivery, easy to time arm stroke that imparts tailing movement on his fastball. Bateman's ceiling feels relatively low because there are elements capping the projection of his stuff, but innings eater starter type. Again, the Orioles, I think, have a type that they want in their system. They don't want to take huge risks on pitchers. They want guys that are going to either be bullpen pieces or guys that are going to fit in the back of the rotation, 3, 4, 5 types, and then they'll sign the better guys with their money. And that's what they say. Haven't really done that. Did that with Burns, made the trade, but haven't signed anybody. But that seems to be the type. Um, and then the other one, Cobb Hightower, is kind of the other bigger prospect in here. And Fangraphs doesn't even have him listed as one of their top prospects. So let's read the pipeline outlook on him. Has a hit grade of 50, power 50, run 55, arm 4 or 50, field 45, overall 45. ETA to the majors 20, 22, middle infielder type. A 6'6" runner in the 60-yard dash. Hightower can also impact the game with his speed. He should get every chance to play shortstop for the time being, but some view him as a future bat first, second baseman too. So we'll see. Again, the Orioles don't really have an infield need, but an interesting prospect to add to the mid tier of the system. So, I said my piece about Laureano. In terms of the prospects, I don't know a ton about any of them, but what I will say is the Orioles clearly came into July with a plan, which was to reinforce the farm system. Had a ton of picks, a ton of first and second round picks that are going to be sort of the ceiling raisers of the system. Then the trade deadline, because you had so many relievers and players with 2 months to go, you weren't going to get a ton of, you weren't going to get top 100 picks, but again, you were going to fortify the mid tier of the mid and mid to lower tier of your farm system and give you depth. I think in terms of what the Orioles came in to do for the trade deadline, they accomplished that. They got rid of the exiting players, got rid of a couple guys, Laureano, Urias, maybe you would have liked back next year, but didn't get rid of the core. Didn't get rid of a Trevor Rogers, who I think, is an important part of 2026. They did what they said they were going to do, and now they've reinforced the mid tier, and now we see what Elias does from here, because this is where it really begins, right? It's the team needs to win in 2026. If they're going to do that, they need to make trades to fortify the bullpen, to fortify the top of the rotation, to maybe add a veteran bat somewhere. That's all going to take prospects. And now the Orioles have the prospects to wiggle with. So some of these names, a lot of these names, you'll probably never see play for the Orioles. Some of them you might see only in the system for 3 months because they're going to trade them in November or December for a number 2 type starter or something like that. That'll be informative of the overall grade for this. I think in terms of, what the Orioles came in to do and what they achieved, you have to give them an A, B plus maybe. Like I said, I didn't love the return for Urias. I didn't love the return for Morton. So maybe a B plus, but he Elias shipped out the guys he wanted to ship out. It opens up innings. You're going to see Mayo play a ton at first. You're probably going to see Beavers up at some point late in August or early September to get some innings in the corner outfield spots, maybe center field a little bit. You're going to see Bradish come back. You're going to see Wells come back. They're going to, make their audition. I mean, Bradish is going to be in the rotation next year as long as he's healthy. Wells, we'll see. He might be a bullpen piece depending on what the moves they make, but you're still going to see him pitch. That's important. And then the bullpen is like a free for all. Batista's hurt. Cano stinks right now, and they've traded Dominguez, Soto, Baker. It's going to be a free for all to see what you can do. The Orioles are going to make signings, I think, in the bullpen this offseason. Maybe they make a big signing, but half the bullpen is going to be these types of guys. You need to see what Wolfram can do, what Stroud can do, what all these guys can do, and that's going to be an important part of it. Yeah, I mean, so I give them a B plus overall for the deadline. Like I said, did what they needed to do. Maybe got not great value for a couple of the guys, but in general, I think they did pretty darn well. And now we'll see for August and September. I'm not going to try to worry about the scoreboard too much, but I am going to focus on individual players. I've talked about this, I talked about this in my last episode. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, in general, a bit of a deflating trade deadline because so many guys are going out, but it really we can bounce right back this offseason. They have the pieces now to make it happen. So let's see it. Mike. Yeah, part one done. Part two is November through February when he needs to make his money and he's on the hot seat now. If the Orioles don't win again next year, I think Elias is going to be gone. So we'll see what he does. Um, but yeah, that's all I've got for this episode. Just wanted to give a quick breakdown. Probably talked for longer than I wanted to. But yeah, leave a comment on the YouTube video or on Spotify or wherever else you can leave comments. You can reach out to us on social media, Blue Sky at the Warehouse Pod. Subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else, and give us a subscription over on YouTube. It would really help us out. We really appreciate it. Um, and yeah, as I said at the top, this has been the Warehouse Podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. My name is Tyler. Thank you for listening, and we will talk to you next time. See you.